Transparency? You need to make a Star Fox video. It wouldn't even be that long. There isn't that much to say about those games anyway. Please, hurry.
Sure, no problem. All in a day's work, General.
Good luck.
When viewed on a broader scale, the appeal of Star Fox feels pretty straightforward, a bit obvious even. We've all yearned for that blue horizon, dreamed about the wonders of space, and longingly traced that jet trail in the sky. The concept of a game that lets you fly a spaceship freely in 3 dimensions from planet to planet seems like it would be universal. Who wouldn't like this stuff? In Nintendo's broader library, it confidently fills that specific niche as the cooler and tougher brother to Pilot Wings. After all, there is no other game like Star Fox. And that makes it easy to somewhat confuse and misconstrue the franchise as bigger and more important than it probably is. In our heart of hearts, we feel like this is one of Nintendo's big hitter flagship brands. But in reality, I guess maybe not. As self-evident as this series may come across, its journey has been turbulent and the course forward unclear. It seems that pretty quickly foxes in aircrafts didn't quite cut it. And so, the wider world of Star Fox is a sprawling and messy undertaking. I guess you saw the runtime. Fox McCloud and his friends have been all over the place. They have fought against a myriad of different adversaries, traveled across the vastness of space, and even saved the galaxy a fair few times for good measure. And while most of these adventures have been pretty straightforward, the universe that they take place in and the games themselves have twisted and turned in all manner of ways. They have experimented with new ideas, taken on wacky control methods, and gone from mostly storyless to storyful. One time, Fox even had a Triceratops sidekick.
What?
This makes these games, as we found out firsthand, surprisingly dense as a subject to talk about. Trying to untangle and make sense of them all as a cohesive whole has certainly not been easy. But we think we have found some clarity here that makes us appreciate this series even more than we previously did. Straight up, me and Kiki both love Star Fox. We grew up with this series and we can confidently say that we like all of the games. Yes, even the one you hate. Especially that one. Because of that, this might not be your ordinary, boring retrospective that only scratches on the surface and eagerly mentions the Star Wings Super Weekend official competition cartridge. We're mostly gonna deep dive into how these games relate to and play off of each other, with a heavy focus on presentation, narrative, and characters, to the degree we're able to. There will be what some might consider super hot takes in this video, but all we ask is for you to keep an open mind and follow along as we take you through this rather unique analysis of the Star Fox world. Do you think that's enough to not have a repeat of the Metroid video? Yeah, you're probably right. Let's just get it over with.
Star Fox 64. Test pilot boy.
You want to know about Star Fox 64?
The very first Star Fox game, Star Wing, might not look like much today, but back in 1993, it was without a doubt quite the technical marvel. It was the flagship title meant to show off Argonaut Software's new Super FX chip that pushed the capabilities of the Super Nintendo further than ever before and brought arguably real 3D graphics to the home screens of millions. And while this was remarkable on its own, what truly made this impressive space adventure memorable in the long term was the colorful cast of animal characters designed by Takaya Imamura. a ragtag gang of mercenaries consisting of Flying Ace Pheasant Falco Lombardi, the somewhat careless Sleepy Toad, the knowledgeable Peppy Hare, and last but not least, the leader, Fox McCloud. Together, they make up the aptly named Star Fox team to defend the Lylat system against invading forces of the evil polygon-shaped ape-man Andross. Although they lacked some of the later installments' characterization and personality, the appeal of these lovable space furries cannot be overstated. While the marketing was mostly touting the hardware's prowess at being able to output unbelievably realistic block shapes, the box art's Thunderbirds-inspired puppets told us a different story. The truth, in fact. These radical Anthros were here to steal the entire show. It was not just another simple game about shooting everything in sight, rather it was one about flying together with your wingmen. These companions added a unique sense of drama to the action scenes, as they helped you out, got themselves into trouble, and even spoke to each other throughout the adventure. You thought you came for the revolutionary future graphics pumping out of your Super Nintendo, but you surely stayed for the gibberish banter spewed by the awesome main characters. Despite being such a primitive game by today's standards and so outdated by the series' own standards that it's been essentially retconned out of existence, both in the sense of narrative and playability, Star Wing still presents us with everything this franchise is all about. Space travel, space animals, and space drama. It's loud, exciting, somewhat romantic, but primarily lighthearted. Really, it's a simple little narrative based on the Japanese idiom Kenyan no Naka, which is essentially the idea that dogs and monkeys don't get along, kinda like cats and dogs. This is presented through the two opposing leaders, General Pepper and Emperor Andross, who are stand-ins for their respective sides, meaning that whatever levels of seriosity this franchise reaches, at the end of the day, it's still just Japanese Tom and Jerry. With all this in mind, Star Wing gives us the framework for how to view the entire franchise, because to some degree, all Star Fox games adhere to these core values: space travel, space animals, space drama, and sometimes Tom and Jerry. And although they weren't as easily identified when the game was released, hindsight permits us to see through Star Wing what the very essence of Star Fox is. Unsurprisingly, this first endeavor was a huge success, so Nintendo and their partners at Argonaut went straight to work on a sequel. Star Fox 2 would improve on this Super FX technology further in order to push the aging Super Nintendo to its absolute limits. But already by the mid-90s, the competition was intensifying. 3D technology was rapidly evolving, and with the significantly more powerful Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation taking the lead in the 3D gaming market, the novelty of Star Wing's polygon graphics suddenly found itself to be, well, not so novel anymore. But while the graphical fidelity wasn't much to brag about, the development team still did their best to innovate and expand upon what Star Wing had already offered anyway. In fact, a lot more focus would be put on player freedom this time around, which meant derailing the R-Wings and letting them be moved around in open spaces, a dynamic map screen that could be navigated to answer incoming fire from Andross's army, and last but not least, an expanded cast of characters, including the outlaws of the Starwolf team that were there to rival and further define who the Star Fox crew truly were by effectively presenting their polar opposites. Despite having such short bio pages in the manual, the few descriptive keywords we are provided tells us a clear picture. Despicable, criminal, betray, inscrutable, sinister, arrogant, cruel, fiendish, devious, exploits, merciless. If this is the sort of riffraff Andross employed, then our heroes surely must be the good ones. Other than the original gang of guys returning to kick some monkey butt, we also have the addition of the first 2 female characters of the entire series. The flirtatious and bold Lynx Miu, and the upbeat dog with an aristocratic past, Faye, pictured Kiki and Alicia. While there isn't necessarily much to be said about them, except for how cool they look, it's nice to see the team's estrogen levels be balanced out a bit more by their inclusion. Besides what the cute animations and their personal ship attributes tell us, we don't know much about them, and the banter from the previous game has been noticeably toned down, which makes it even harder to discern who Miu and Faye really are. However, the most notable and important aspect here is that the entire Star Fox team is playable for the first time, including these new bodacious recruits. This seemingly tiny detail might appear insignificant, but it honestly makes all the difference in the world, as the crew isn't just passively being a part of the scenery while you're out adventuring anymore. They're capable pilots and whatever else you want them to be, by virtue of you being able to control them yourself. You even get to choose a duo at the start of your mission, essentially constructing your own little Star Fox team. This is what makes the idea of further honing in on the vibrant crew such a brilliant one. Instead of having Slippy, Falco and the rest of the gang once again serve as background noise for Fox McCloud's personal space bouts, they are finally fully realized on an even playing field through the sheer power of interactivity. Being able to pick out a member of the cast and label them as your favorite and then play as them through this strategic war scenario is certainly empowering, but it is also a way of expanding upon the replayability of the original. In Starwing, you could choose a path at the beginning of the game, but here that path is built by the player from scratch and can be replaced on a whim. To play as the entire crew and choose who to bring into battle adds more opportunities for creative and expressive play, and incentivizes you to come back time and time again to change up the team dynamics. Which is to say that the developers of Star Fox 2 looked at the previous game, saw the seams and strings that held it all together, and decided to cut them all, to give the player what they all truly wanted: being able to play as Slippy Toad to save the goddamn galaxy. The similarities with that other furry franchise, Sonic the Hedgehog, are quite hard to miss, and it's no wonder that the fanbases seem to have some significant overlap. There's the colorful cast of appealing animal characters that, despite not having necessarily deep personalities, manages to stick out and become more meaningful to the player simply by the fact that they are all playable to some extent. That games like Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Sonic Adventure made this into a staple of the Sonic franchise, and more importantly, one that fans would come to expect, isn't particularly surprising either. With such a large pool of characters to choose from, one is bound to become your favorite. And it's probably Amy, but that's neither here nor there. The point I'm trying to get at by going on this slight tangent is that the massive leaps forward Star Fox 2 took, in terms of the characters, would have undoubtedly driven the series in a different direction, and most likely created expectations similar to what we saw with something like Sonic Adventure. That is to say, expectations of Star Fox being a game where you get the freedom to play as several different characters for the fun of it. Some of them might even be women. What a concept. It's too bad then that Star Fox 2 never got to shape the series in any meaningful way. The game is infamous for being finished, slated for a 1996 release, and then unceremoniously cancelled out of nowhere in favor of a completely different Nintendo 64 outing. Although a leaked ROM simmered around on the web for 2 decades, it wasn't until 2017 that the game finally saw an official release on the tacky-ass SNES Classic, and later in 2019 on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Meaning that whatever innovations and new ideas Star Fox 2 had that would have pushed the series forward never got a chance to have any real impact. Now it's barely an interesting footnote in video game history, a curiosity released way past its expiration date, a fun anecdote to pull out at parties full of nerds who still pretend to care about Star Fox.
I've been to 6 of those.
The legacy of Star Fox 2 would not be entirely forgotten internally though, as the next officially released game in the franchise, Lylat Wars, would borrow several elements from its then scrapped sister and significantly improve upon them. The open-ended combat scenarios that were previously a bit too disorienting return in the more easily navigated all-range mode sections that allow for smoother dogfights, which works especially well with the comeback of the rambunctious Starwolf team, led by Wolf O'Donnell, that were to once again rival the Star Fox gang and give them trouble on occasion. Being that this is essentially where the team was officially introduced, they certainly made a snazzy first entrance, and firmly established them as the Team Dark to Star Fox's Team Sonic. Sadly, this entry would also get rid of the multiple playable characters in favor of once again having the player take on the role of Fox McCloud, with the rest of the crew as supporting cast. Notable is the lack of female characters, as the crew has been reduced back to the original 4 found in Starwing. The new recruits, Mio and Faye, are unfortunately missing in action. In fact, they have never ever been heard from again, and with hindsight on our side, their disappearance is a loss felt throughout. Instead, we have the sassy Cat Moreau, the pink feline with a fancy for birds and a pronounced feminine attitude, whose impact is only slightly more memorable than the white bread dude, Bill.
Bill! Is that you?
She momentarily helps Fox and the others a bit while screwing with Falco for being a nerd, and then she fucks off. That's it. Character over, I guess. With how much Star Fox 2 attempted to improve upon its predecessor and briskly move the franchise along to new places, there is also a case to be made that it's a bit disappointing to see that the game that replaced it would sliver its way back to the original and more or less repeat it verbatim. And before anyone tries to flay me for uttering such sacrilege, this is not to say anything about the overall quality of Lylat Wars. It's obviously a classic that defined a lot of people's understanding of what the franchise was supposed to be. But to us, me and this weird animal person I call my wife, Star Fox 2 is at least conceptually a much more interesting Star Fox experience in how it radically evolves the formula by focusing on ways to interpret the core of the game rather than falling into predictable repetition. It is simply a fact that for the most part, Lylat Wars presents itself as a reimagining of the original Starwing to essentially become the de facto origin point of the Star Fox mythos, both in terms of narrative and mechanics, which may have gotten the franchise and its audience prematurely hung up on what a Star Fox game is supposed to even be. For all intents and purposes, this might as well be the first one, functionally a remake, but that also means that the series' identity was excessively established due to us essentially getting the first game twice. That stuff is hard to shake off. Most important for this new starting point of Star Fox is how Lylat Wars further cemented Fox McCloud's main character status, by fleshing out the story while giving him more purpose and personal stakes in the battle against the self-proclaimed Emperor Andros. In this game, it's established that his father, James McCloud, was the leader of the original Star Fox team, betrayed by his former wingman Pigma Dengar and presumably killed by Andros himself. Peppy then narrowly escapes the battle and manages to locate Fox to tell him of his father's unfortunate demise. This prompts Fox to nepotistically form a new Star Fox team together with Falco, Slippy, and his father's trusty old pal, Peppy. No girls allowed. This is where Fox McCloud goes from being that one guy among a bunch of other guys to being the guy. There's not much being added here, but it's undeniable that through these small means, Fox is granted more motivation to take the lead than the rest of the crew. In the previous games, the name Star Fox felt incidental, descriptive, but by Lylat Wars, it's very much intentional. Possessive. It's a fairly small distinction, but one that makes a huge difference when it comes to focus going forward. We take it for granted today, but I mean, think about it. In Starwing, there was a lot of intentional vagueness to the characters, and enough of an even playing field to essentially make any of them a potential candidate for saving the day. Fox just happened to be the one guy playable. This would then be further explored in Star Fox 2's expanded playable roster, breaking down the barriers of what a Star Fox protagonist could even be, by letting you choose for yourself. Lylat Wars, on the other hand, being the game that had the benefit of a timely official release, got to dictate the future with a firm stance, and finally solidified Fox as the one true playable character of the franchise going forward. A huge factor to this is the connection between Fox and his father James. If the war with Venom is the external conflict, the internal is Fox overcoming the loss of his father. Quite simply, he needs to let go of the grief and fulfill his role as James' successor. This gives the entire narrative a massive tilt towards Fox as protagonist, in a more meaningful way than him simply being the playable character. For better or worse, this is now his story, and the crew are merely support on that journey towards asserting Fox as worthy of the MacLeod family name. This conflict is heavily reinforced by how the bad guys will continuously taunt Fox about his father's passing.
You'll be seeing your dad soon, Fox. Too bad Dad's not here to see you fail.
Die just like your father.
The counterbalance being Peppy's wistful reverence of Fox's skills.
You're becoming more like your father.
Your father helped me like that too. This brings back memories of your dad.
One might make the observation that these expectations definitely weigh on Fox, and result in him a bit aggressively taking command throughout the game. In every on-rails level, he is at the front, in charge of the enemy assault. Basically, there is no level where Fox plays support to someone else doing the wicked moves. He's terminally in the spotlight. This pressure to keep up with his father's legacy reaches a boiling point in the hard route to Venom. When Fox is being dragged down by Andros in his demise, James MacLeod reaches out from beyond the grave.
Don't ever give up, my son.
Father?
As the Venom base collapses, Fox is guided to safety by this mysterious otherworldly Arwing. His companions cheer for his survival, while Fox absent-mindedly watches the stars for traces of his father. Was it a hallucination? A ghost? Is James still alive? Perhaps it was nothing but good old symbolism. Only at the most crucial moment did Fox live up to his father's legacy and achieve not just the incredible, but the impossible. When you read the entire game from the perspective of Fox living up to his father's name, this trickier route represents a definitive step on that journey. To get this far, the player needs to get onto the more difficult route across the Lylat system in order to reach what is essentially the backdoor to Venom. Andros' asshole, if you will. Every branch leading you towards or keeping you on that trail is only accomplished by performing specific level goals, meaning this outcome represents some form of mastery of the courses, at least enough to control your trajectory between them. The metaphysical meeting with James puts the goal in clear view. This is who Fox's dad is. This is who he needs to become in order to live up to the family name. Sunglasses. And this is actually a real goal within the game, in the most superficially quirky but cute way possible. You see, if you shoot down enough bad guys in a level, you will be awarded with a medal. Do this on all levels, and you will unlock the expert mode, which is obviously harder, but way more importantly, Fox gets a makeover. That's right. He puts on a pair of sunglasses to look just like his daddy, showing he mastered the Lylat system and is now worthy of the MacLeod name by living every day a little bit more dangerously. That's straight up adorable. Despite the heavier focus placed on Fox within this narrative, which forfeits a lot of the scope that Star Fox 2 presented, Lylat Wars still builds upon the characterization of the franchise in its own ways. Primarily through the voice acting, which immediately transformed the previous dialogue bits from amusing little text lines to infinitely quotable iconic one-liners.
Do a barrel roll. can't let you do that, Star Fox. No! Give the blade! Are you gonna listen to that monkey? Cocky little freak, my beautiful reward!
Only I have the brains to rule Lilac.
It is undeniable that Lilith Wars would firmly establish the personalities of the characters and the world that surrounded them. I think there is a serious case to be made, however, that this game is so memorable not because of the writing itself, but because of its arcade structure. It's a score hunt, which rewards players for their familiarity with the levels and objectives, where alternate paths lead to new routes through the story. This even became one of the most classic aspects of the entire series. Put simply, you don't just play this game once or twice. To see everything in Lilith Wars, you need to play the shit out of it and experience it over and over again. We don't know how to quote the entire script on command simply because the writing was so good, but because we played it to the point where it was all etched into our brains. It's truly a testament to the qualities of Lilith Wars, the Star Fox game to end all Star Fox games, that its iconic status is an effect of it simply being so deceptively fun to play. It's a great game, conventionally the best in the series. One could say it's the unattainable golden standard for anyone afraid of change. Anyway, with all of that stuff out of the way, let's talk about Star Fox Adventures.
Okay, old timer. Turn it down, Slippy.
Despite not being as popular or well regarded as its predecessors, I can confidently say that Star Fox Adventures is, without a doubt, the most interesting title to ever grace the series. But not necessarily because of its qualities as a competently put together piece of entertainment. I mean, it is an enjoyable video game with some impressive visuals and fun quotable characters, but simply being another one in a long line of good Nintendo games hardly makes it special. No, what's truly fascinating about Star Fox Adventures is its more peculiar aspects. The messy development timeline, questionable choices that were made along the way, and last but not least, what it fundamentally does to the already established Star Fox formula and its universe. With almost 30 years worth of knowledge about the franchise, it's understandable if Star Fox Adventures would seem like a bigger departure now than it truly was way back when. Today, we have several more games in the series available to us, and a lot of context at our disposal. But back in 2002, it could only be compared with 2 other Star Fox games. Free if you were a freaking nerd about it. Back then, Star Fox was literally a duo of games about flying spaceships. But more broadly speaking, they were about discovering the vastness of space, traveling to different planets and finding out what lies beyond the safety of your home domains. That's why we said one of the core values was space travel, not space battles. In the manual of the first game, the Star Fox crew are even explicitly described as adventurers. So it makes sense that a 3rd/4th installment would potentially decide to change focus to explore one singular planet. It's in their profession after all. You might say it's part of the lore. It is also worth mentioning that between Lilith Wars and Adventures, Fox McCloud had made a name for himself in not 1, but 2 Super Smash Bros. Games. In these casual party fighters, he's no longer in his trusty R-Wing, but instead runs around kicking people in the shin with his own 2 robot legs. This is notable because at this point, the Super Smash Bros. Series had already outsold Star Fox by quite a margin, so it's reasonable to assume that a lot of people simply knew Fox better as the guy who kicks Zelda in the shin, rather than someone dicking around in a moldy fighter jet all day. Even predating that, we had the secret on-foot combat alternative in Lilith Wars multiplayer mode, and if we were getting really obsessive about feet, there was also the walker from Star Fox 2. Additionally, Miyamoto wanted R-Wing to transform into a freaking person in Lilith Wars, Heck, Imamura had even been toying around with the idea of making an adventure game featuring the Star Fox cast way before Star Fox Adventures would even come to be a thing. The point being that it wasn't that far-fetched to present the concept of space hero Fox McCloud not being in a spaceship when making the next game for the new Nintendo console. Evidence points to it being inevitable. I mean, we were around 10 years old at the time, basically the target audience, and we had no problem with it. We just thought it was awesome to be playing a game where Fox McCloud explores Jurassic Park. With Lylat Wars being so fundamental to the franchise, or more accurately the fanbase, it's on the other hand not surprising that some people with the benefit of hindsight would make Star Fox Adventures out to be much more shocking than it really was. You might have seen some other YouTubers being angry about this game, even pretending like they were somehow tricked into thinking this would be another Lylat Wars, despite the box clearly having McCloud and his pals depicted standing firmly on the ground surrounded by fuckos, and the screenshots on the back telling you exactly what it is. It's not like this game ever tried to fool anyone about what it was. All angles of the case shows Fox on his feet, even the spine for fuck's sake. What we're trying to say is that Star Fox Adventures, as the name implies, is an adventure game through and through, without dishonesty. It ditches the old school arcade sensibilities of its predecessors to focus wholeheartedly on a more intricate story and modern gameplay reminiscent of 3D Zelda games to usher in a new generation of gaming. With Lylat Wars solidifying Fox McCloud as the unequivocal main guy of the franchise, his new role as adventure hero shouldn't come as a huge surprise. But the game manages to throw us a few curveballs in terms of characterization. As we return to the Star Fox team once more, we get a glimpse of how fame and glory has affected the group since last we saw them several years ago. It turns out that the crew has been comfortably content with their heroics performed in Lylat Wars, and much like the fans, have come to take it all for granted. They're big shots now, too huge to even care in fact. And as nothing seems to be able to capture that same high again, they instead choose to live a cushy lifestyle of subversive decadence, surrounded by discarded pizza boxes, pin-up posters, and loud butt rock music. There's a cynical streak to it all, much akin to other Rare games at the time, where the supposed heroes simply have grown to see what they do as a complete chore, and only care about getting paid at the end of the day. This is where the gang agrees to take on a mission on planet Saria, located somewhere in the outskirts of the Lylat system, for what's presumably a hefty amount of cash. Essentially, the dinosaur planet is magically being pulled apart, and it's up to Fox McCloud to go down there and figure out what the heck is going on. After following some leads, he finds his new sidekick, Prince Tricky, and together they go on a fun globe-trotting adventure on a planet that's roughly the size of a square kilometer. It turns out that the evil General Scales has stolen the 4 spellstones that keep the planet together, and deviously hid them at 4 inconvenient locations. These are the MacGuffins that you find in the dungeons, which Fox brings back to the Force Point temples to restore order to the land. He faces off against Scales in an anticlimactic non-encounter, and Andros appears because he is still contractually obligated to do so. Fox defeats him, and in the end learns to be more humble and once again finds that heroic spirit to help others he had lost in the beginning of the game. No one cleans up the spaceship though, which will be important later. Being the main playable character of an adventure game without wingmen circling around him all the time, Fox was granted even more presence in this story. Instead of shooting everything on sight, the new Fox McCloud has to interact with the environments in a different way, speaking with regular people other than his crew, and has an arc about overcoming his own personal arrogance. A small one, but it's definitely there. With this new structure, it would seem the developers had a bit of trouble fitting the rest of the Star Fox gang into the overarching narrative, as Peppy and Slippy have been reduced to nothing more than menu options, who at their best spout some exposition and point you in the right direction from time to time. Falco is just gone completely for the majority of the adventure, portrayed as some biker drifter who Deus Ex Machinas the final battle. He's literally the Fonz.
And I can't wait to get back with the Star Fox team. Hey guys, you don't mind if I hang with you again, do you?
Sure, Falco. It's great to have you back.
And this most definitely hurts their characterization quite a bit, as Star Fox Adventures, more than any other game, firmly categorizes them as unimportant in the shadow of Fox. For none other is this more true than the supposed new female lead, who I have strategically omitted from this discussion so far. There she is. This is Crystal, theoretically the second playable character of Star Fox Adventures. And when I say playable, that's in huge quotation marks. It turns out that the true deception of this game never had anything to do with the lack of space combat, but rather it was all about this one character and her role in the adventure. The cover has her standing together with Fox, seemingly ready to tell General Scales' henchmen to fuss off with her bare fists. A lot of the promotional art likewise features her prominently together with other characters, and more importantly, our main guy, making it seem like she's going to be some kind of recurring and important ally on your journey. It's even through her eyes that we experience the first few minutes of the game, as she too tries to help the people of Saria, but for altruistic reasons instead of personal gain or glory. She even forfeits her deeply personal quest of finding her parents' murderer to do this, making Crystal a great contrast to Fox in his internal struggles to overcome his own arrogance. It's actually a pretty great setup. It's too bad then that she instantly gets captured and never has the chance to be anything more than a trophy for main character Fox McCloud after a job well done. The truth about Crystal is that she's not that much of a character at all. In fact, she's barely a plot point in between other plot points of more importance. She is here to quickly introduce us to General Scales and then be ironically trapped in a crystal contraption to serve as bait in Andross's ridiculously convoluted plan to revive himself. You see, Andross needs Crystal locked up in his spooky torture machine for her to channel the so-called Krasoa spirits, whose power he will then use to regain his own strength. To do this, he somehow instigated war on the planet by manipulating an unknowing General Scales in order to have the losing faction send out a distress signal that Crystal conveniently happens to answer. He then waited behind this one pillar for Crystal to come by so he could shove her into the magic stream, alright? However, with Crystal locked up, he also needs someone else to gather the other Krasoa spirits for him, so he gambles on the Queen Earthwalker sending another distress call to the Cornerian army, who relays it to the Star Fox team, so his arch nemesis, Fox McCloud, can personally come to Saria in an attempt to solve the whole planet problem. Upon which, Andross tricks Fox by appearing in front of him, disguised as an actual Krasoa, and claiming that finding all the spirits will save this random girl Fox has never heard about before. Fox is reluctant at first, but after seeing that Crystal is hot, he's convinced to take on this little side mission. And the amazing part is that Andross's plan actually worked. He's truly the only one with the brains to rule Lylat. You'd think that the prospect of saving Crystal's blue ass would be motivation enough, but at some point by the end of the game, it's revealed that the Krasoa spirits are also needed to put the planet together again, kind of trivializing the former task in favor of one with much higher stakes that you were already taking care of anyway. The importance of this damsel in distress mission was already questionable in the grand scheme of things, and with this information, it becomes more or less pointless. The story makes it abundantly clear that Crystal doesn't really matter, but this pretty much takes the cake. It's like we were taunted with the mere concept of being able to play as a woman in a Star Fox game, only to have it all be taken away, as she was reduced further and further into absolute nothingness. I suppose it's understandable that this aspect of Crystal isn't often talked about in detail when people discuss Star Fox Adventures and the franchise as a whole. After all, the game itself doesn't seem to treat it with much gravity. Crystal has less screen time than the freaking Spellstones, and it's not like Nintendo are unfamiliar with the trope of damsels in distress, making it all seem awfully like status quo as usual. The difference here is that compared to, say, Bowser's cartoony shenanigans involving Princess Peach in the Super Mario games, the kidnapping in Star Fox Adventures has a much more sinister and uncomfortable streak to it that makes it stick out from the rest. Let me paint you a picture. On top of the Krasoa Palace, we find Crystal sealed in this menacing contraption of metal and magic, seemingly unable to move or even speak by her own free will. Her agency has been completely stripped away from her as she's suffocating within her solid prison. A sleeping beauty of sorts, only waiting to be rescued by whomever might find her there. Meanwhile, the statue of a mighty Krasoa looms over the tower and ominously watches her at all times. But that's not any old statue, as it's later revealed to be none other than Andros himself in disguise, the man who not only trapped her here in the first place, but is also implied to have killed her parents at one point in time. With this knowledge, the ever-present gaze of the statue gains a much more threatening aura, one of malice and perversion. When Fox first learns of Crystal, it's through her groans of pain as she pleads for her life. It's unclear if this is yet another trick by Andros, but neither Fox nor the player are aware of the evil doctor's plans at this point, and can only assume that the agony they heard is nothing but the truth. Listening to our supposed female lead in turmoil like this is a bit more real and uncomfortable than I'd personally expect from a game about foxes in space. There is a level of urgency here that requires more seriousness than Star Fox Adventures is able to provide. Crystal is supposedly being abused in her crystalline prison, slowly dying in front of our very eyes. And yet, Fox can only think with his macaque and oogles her in the helpless state that she has found herself in. All the while, a sexy saxophone version of the Cape Claw theme is being played in the background, suggesting that the unconscious body of this troubled woman is supposed to be desirable rather than tragic.
Wow, she's beautiful.
Pepe here! What are you doing, Fox?
I'm with you, Pepe old pal. What the fuck? And this is where Crystal's connection to her main character and her ultimate role in the narrative is, well, fully crystallized. Fox McCloud is the spacefaring hero exploring a primitive planet and then conquers the seemingly native, tribal-coded woman like some kind of weird-ass colonizer or something. Whatever she has been facing, her goals at the beginning of the adventure, who she is, where she comes from, is unimportant. Because Crystal has one simple purpose in this game, and that's to be a spicy vixen that Fox can be paired up with at the end. When all is said and done, she boards the Great Fox to thank the guy that she has exchanged a total of 2 lines and a few seconds of dreamy eye contact with. Rob detects Fox has a boner, Slippy is surprisingly into that, and no one even bothered to clean the place up. So we end on a shot of our 2 lovebirds standing in front of a pile of trash while that sexy saxophone excitedly plays in the background. This is such a perfect frame that exemplifies everything I feel about this entire scenario. It's amazing. Fucking hell, what is... It's a shame how often this entire crystal thing is glanced over or entirely ignored when people talk about Star Fox Adventures. Because I gotta say, as a whack myself, I find this to be absolutely horrendous, and so blatant it's almost impossible to ignore. I think this is a baffling way to introduce a female lead even by 2002 standards, not to mention her being the first official one in the series altogether. Like, gee, she can't even use her own staff properly, shakes my head. And the worst part about all of this is that it didn't have to be this way. In fact, at one point, it wasn't.
General Scales, Hiko, Kohud, or Taskuki, Eve Dinosaur Planet.
It's pretty much common knowledge today that Star Fox Adventures began its life as an ambitious Nintendo 64 title called Dinosaur Planet. Coincidentally, the best game never made. And while comparisons between the two are fun and deeply fascinating, we're focusing mainly on Crystal, because she's the most vital part of this. Essentially, Dinosaur Planet is not a Star Fox game, but Crystal is a Star Fox character, so it's still relevant. Through heavy reworking, this became a Star Fox game, but that was at the cost of the initial vision and Crystal's original portrayal. We're gonna spare you that one stolen JonTron gag that YouTubers always perform about how Shigeru Miyamoto personally barged into Rare's headquarters and forced the Star Fox brand on them, like a little goblin man. Because it's overdone and people seem to believe it's actually that simple. Instead, we did some research and made ourselves a rough timeline to triangulate what truly went down. So, Dinosaur Planet had been in development since the release of Diddy Kong Racing in late 1997, but the big Star Fox change definitely happened around E3 in May of 2000. The developers went there with no other intention than showing the game to the public for the first time, but instead, they were told by higher-ups to not talk too much about the project, and were put in a meeting with Nintendo about changing it into a Star Fox game. You see, behind the scenes, indistinct executives and unnamed bigwigs of Nintendo and Rare had been talking about this intriguing collaboration. It's fair to assume that Miyamoto was part of these discussions, especially considering that during an interview with IGN that same E3, he was asked about his thoughts on Dinosaur Planet, and mischievously answered that he wished they would use Star Fox characters so it could be called Star Fox Adventures. After which, he mysteriously suggested he should call the team and talk about it. This interview is most definitely the reason why people originally construed the idea that Miyamoto single-handedly changed Dinosaur Planet into Star Fox Adventures. What this mostly says, however, is that he was the only one who couldn't shut the heck up about it. Because of course he couldn't. He never can. Pikmin 4. At the end of the day, this was a group effort. Miyamoto ended up being producer on the project, but so was Chris Stamper, and for whatever reason, you don't often hear about his involvement in this decision. Nintendo couldn't force Rare to anything they didn't agree to. Not to mention Imamura, who was a supervisor and highly important in the effort to redesign the characters and the world to fit the Star Fox brand. If anyone barged into the Rare building, it was him! Considering he literally did when he stayed in England for 2 whole months to oversee a later portion of the development. What is definitely true, however, is that the game was planned to be quite different before the deal with Nintendo was finally settled and the project pivoted to becoming a Star Fox game. Most notable is Crystal, who was going to share the main character status with another furry called Saber, later replaced by Fox McCloud in the final product. Crystal seemingly had her own little adventure going on, with personal goals and a sense of purpose that the later iteration could only dream of. Most of all though, Dinosaur Planet Crystal had a lot of personality. She was a fun and quirky gal with a lot of determination and a good heart to help others. This version of Crystal is cute as a button, but likewise strong and brave to boot. She's even voiced by Evelyn Novakovic, famous for composing what is secretly the best Donkey Kong Country soundtrack ever made.
No, wait! I've got to find Discovery Falls!
Really, this early version of Crystal is the most impressively advanced character ever displayed by a Nintendo 64. It's that sort of late bloom beauty of a developer who has fully learned the technical limitations and how to cheekily sidestep them. The clever use of dynamic texture changes for her eyes together with pronounced body language makes her delightfully expressive. Seeing this Crystal in motion is absolutely riveting and leaves us craving for more. I'm obsessed about seeing this work of utter perfection in motion. She's designed, presented, and animated with the satisfaction of old school cartoons, in much the same way as they worked around their own equally daunting limitations. You cannot simply look at such a piece of exquisite craftsmanship and say that it would be better on a GameCube. The raw processing power of the GameCube destroys the meticulous ingenuity of this design by making that hard work redundant. This character needs to exist on a Nintendo 64 as a display of what the Nintendo 64 was capable of. That is the only context in which she makes sense. We were robbed of this. They took Crystal away from us. The bastards. Anyway, thanks to more recent leaks, we also know a lot more about the development, specific scenarios that would play out for the two heroes, things that were cut and what was then cobbled together into the final release. It's eye-opening to play as Crystal and see how prominent she actually was, and how a lot of the scenes that Fox McCloud occupy today were once entirely dedicated to Crystal herself. Everything relating to General Scales was once part of her adventure, and would, funnily enough, still have ended in a non-battle, but with a much funnier outcome. The leaked build is filled to the brim with these revelations. We could talk about it all day. Have you ever wondered why Crystal even boarded General Scales' ship in the beginning? Well, you see, she was originally supposed to go there to find and rescue her friend Kite, who later becomes her personal sidekick for the rest of the story. Seriously, anything involving Cloud Runners are either cut or repurposed Crystal segments that were often supposed to involve Kite in some way. Like this random guy who just happens to help Fox out when he gets captured. Yeah, that was meant to be Kite too. In fact, the entire Lightfoot village is a bunch of Crystal's greatest hits. She even does the test of strength against Musclefoot. How cool isn't that? Maybe one of the most interesting parts of Dinosaur Planet is the cut location Discovery Falls, which is not only surprisingly massive for a Nintendo 64 game, including these dinky log riding and cable car sections that don't work properly, but it's also highly important to Crystal's adventure. As the name implies, this is where she discovers a lot of what her purpose is going to be in the game. It's essentially a pivotal moment for Crystal as a character and the narrative as a whole. With how meaningful this place is, it is also fitting that the song that plays in the background is none other than what would later become the Cape Claw theme. We think it's fair to say that this might as well be Crystal's main theme for all intents and purposes, and it kind of explains the thinking behind using it as a basis for the sexy saxophone version that unfortunately ended up representing her in the final product. The contrast between Crystal in Dinosaur Planet and the one in Star Fox Adventures should be immediately apparent. She went from being a fully fledged main character to becoming an underdeveloped damsel in distress, from cute and spirited to sexualized and trivial. It's shocking to see the difference, but it's also not too surprising. The radical changes in priorities required to fit Fox McCloud into Dinosaur Planet meant that something would have to give. And that something was sadly Crystal. At some point it was decided that it would be better to streamline the adventure and focus on one of the playable characters rather than both of them. I doubt this was a decision taken lightly by the development team, but considering the project had pivoted to being a Star Fox game in particular, the choice was pretty much made for them already. Fox McCloud is the guy after all. The Dinosaur Planet team clearly liked Crystal enough that they didn't want to discard her entirely in favor of their new mandated main character though. In fact, according to early meeting notes, that was one of the first decisions that they made together with Nintendo. And although I fully understand the sentiment, I can't say I agree with the conclusions they came to. This Whiplash redesign and the drastic change in purpose is so baffling to me. Like, what were they even thinking? I get the idea that Fox and Crystal are both the same species, kick butties according to lore, so making her into a simple love interest for him to save is an easy answer to the problem. But you have to take a few more steps to get to the point where you then also make her into a sexy pinup with sultry eyes. Turns out that there is an explanation to all of this though. From what we can gather, the new design for Crystal wasn't finalized until the trips to Rare that Star Fox character designer Taka Imamura did in order to oversee development. During these days, he supposedly, according to his own words in an interview, drew a lot of pictures of Crystal. And I kid you not, these sketches were inspired by the risque clothing of comic book character Vampirella of all things. But that's not all. Apparently Miyamoto himself, big shot at the big boy Nintendo Corporation, has since the very beginning said that he thought it would be nice to add a sexy character to the mix. No, really, this is for real. It's an actual interview. You gotta see this. Link in the description. Here we have Imamura, live in 4K, snitching on his best bud for wanting his Persona self-insert Fox McCloud to get a hot girlfriend in a Star Fox game. I have no idea how the team over at Rare could let this go through. It is so far removed from what Crystal was originally supposed to be. She has been stripped, literally and metaphorically, of almost everything that characterized her in favor of some added sex appeal. She's unrecognizable, a shadow of her former self. Maybe it would have been a mercy to let her die together with Dinosaur Planet after all. And don't get us wrong now. Despite all of this, we still like Crystal, as a lot of you probably do too. I mean, we wouldn't go to the lengths of analyzing her like this if we didn't care. We do, however, think it's fair to say that her portrayal in Star Fox Adventures is rather poor, to put it lightly. At the point of her introduction, the appeal of Adventures Crystal seems to have been purely based on aesthetics and concept. That is to say that Crystal is a cool character, in theory, but it doesn't exactly pan out in practice. She has a lot of potential that is essentially squandered, case in point, Dinosaur Planet. Crystal had everything going for her, and even though she's reduced to an objectified cardboard cutout with 5 lines of dialogue, that still shines through to some extent. Crystal is an exciting idea because she has all of this underlying depth that is barely inferred by the finished product, but blatant behind the scenes. To some extent, I still find it fair to call Adventures her game by virtue of its origins. I mean, it's kinda hard to view Adventures Crystal in a vacuum, because this character is so defined by surrounding context. Crystal would go on to feature in more games, and at one point, she was meant to have one of her own. This is only a fraction of the full picture, but it is a fraction that is so strange when taken as intended that it boggles the mind a bit. But despite arguable design choices and her embarrassingly small impact on Star Fox Adventures itself, with her essentially being nothing but a carryover from the scattered remains of another annexed project, we believe that Crystal's injection into the franchise drastically altered its course. Possibly forever. Star Fox Adventures and the merging with Dinosaur Planet upends the already fragile balance of the series, and then breaks it. Not necessarily in a bad way, but like in a what even is a Star Fox kind of way. That's a question with an answer often taken for granted by the wider fanbase. But this game dares to ask it anyway. And at the center of this question stands Crystal. an irrefutable representation, and I guess survivor, of what once was Dinosaur Planet. And she's now one of the main characters of Star Fox. She is the universal signifier of change to the series, the anchor to show that we have moved past the starting point. Star Fox Adventures is a little bit more serious. It progresses the status quo and drastically expands the scope of the franchise beyond the Lylat system's established planets. The jolly old goofball days of Lylat Wars are over and a new era begins. The age of melodramatic space opera. That is not to say that Star Fox has completely lost its identity in this confusing franchise melding. Of course not. It has merely broadened. It is often claimed that what Star Fox fans truly want is the on-rails shooting of the originals, but I don't believe that to be entirely true. We think part of why a surprising amount of people like this game is precisely because of how different it is, how it dares to be something else and braves a new generation of gaming with a more modern take on the franchise. It's not for naught that it became the 13th best-selling game on the GameCube, beating out other big hitters like 4 Resident Evil, Metroid Prime 2 End Choices, and Sonic 2 Adventure Battle. The supposed hate for Star Fox Adventures feels overstated. It's certainly a bit messy for obvious reasons, but I don't think it deserves the scorn it has garnered over the years. Instead of focusing on the long corridors that hide the loading screens and how this game somehow killed Star Fox, maybe people should have looked at things like how Crystal is represented instead. Like, you don't even have to be a so-called SJW on a feminist frequency to be able to recognize this stuff. You might as well have been a 10-year-old kid on Christmas Eve, playing your newly gifted copy of Star Fox Adventures by the living room TV, opening on the tit vixen while the whole family is spectating, and slowly dying on the inside because even your prepubescent brain can comprehend that this is a bit sleazy. Beyond childhood discomfort and rampant Fox-based sexism though, it turns out that Star Fox Adventures is pretty neat and memorable. At least we enjoyed the game, and it seems to have garnered something of a cult following over the years. And even though it's so on Star Fox that it somewhat breaks the pacing of this video, it's still a fun time. I think its biggest contribution to the series as a whole is tied to this status as a strange departure that is still treated like an unquestionable part of the franchise regardless. It is the most radically different Star Fox game ever released. But you know what? It's still absolutely a Star Fox game, and that only broadens the scope for what you could possibly do with this series. It's not at all reliant on just flying spaceships. There is more to Star Fox than that sort of spectacle. Adventures essentially braves the hardest challenge of all in trying to be Star Fox without relying on what many perceive to be its most fundamental aspect. And that has to be commended regardless of results. If anything, it is undeniably bold and unconcerned about fan expectations, which would set an example for a couple more years to come.
Apoptosis, huh?
The next entry in the series is, much like its predecessor, a curious one. This game was first officially announced in a press release way back in May 2002 as a collaboration between Nintendo and the team at Namco who had previously worked on Ace Combat. Although it didn't have a name yet, the announcement came with this flashy promotional poster that told you everything you needed to know. R-Wings flying around in space, baby! What's funny about this is how the reveal actually predated the release of Adventures by a few months, meaning that this supposed huge departure of the series hadn't even had a chance to take off before we went straight back to what more conservative fans would call form. And you might look at this and go, well, no one knew about this back then. But I have to interject. At the time I was a measly 10-year-old Swedish kid, and even I knew about it, thanks to Club Nintendo magazine, this one in particular, where they talk about the exciting collab between Nintendo and Namco and the games planned.
Och håll i er, ett nytt spel i Star Fox-serien!
Which roughly translates to, here's more Star Fox in spaceships you silly nerds, now stop complaining. Eventually, the game was finally released under the title Star Fox Assault, which indeed saw the return to Arwings and Landmasters in distinctly Lilacian environments once more. The big draw, however, was that Fox would hop out of these vehicles and take on the action on foot with an arsenal of big scary guns. While being a fairly logical idea for the series' evolution and a nice continuation from Star Fox Adventures, melding both old and new, this was not without controversy. Primarily, the biggest contention we've seen over the years remarks on how a majority of the levels are focused on this ground-based combat, which, while novel, didn't feel much like the Star Fox of old. In other words, there were not that many on-rails Arwing levels of classic Starwing action like one might have craved after Adventures. If the idea was that Star Fox had lost its identity, this was only half a step back to it. We find this sort of evolution to be pretty interesting though. Star Fox Assault is clearly a game both developed and released in a post-Adventures context. Most tellingly by how Crystal decided against all better judgment to join the Slob Fox crew, but also the shift in mechanics, tone and presentation. It's safe to say that even if the early announcement of Assault meant that Adventures was always framed as a sort of detour, that game still had an impact on the franchise. We had undoubtedly taken a step away from Lylat Wars, but instead of reverting back to that point, something tempted the developers to stick to continuity and press onward, which meant that the world of Star Fox had finally, for the first time ever, progressed a bit with this game. The crew is noticeably older than before, seem to be more experienced and have finally learned to clean up after themselves. Our good old pal Peppy is looking at retirement while Crystal has taken his position as a pilot on the team. Falco refuses to ever step out of his Arwing during the entire game, Slippy supposedly does machines, and Fox McCloud has learned to be a more responsible and level-headed leader. Notably, the story picks up in a post-Lylat Wars conflict where Andrew Oikeni, former Starwolf member and Andros' pissy nephew, has inherited the Venom army and perpetuated the then 9-year-old conflict with Corneria. Clearly, the main idea Star Fox Assault wants to convey with its opening set piece is back in the saddle. We're momentarily returned to the simple squabbles of dogs and monkeys, in a recreation of the classic level Sector Y, with a slight hint of Area 6. In fact, this mission is not just one level like the other ones in the game. This is a straight up double feature, as the pursuit of Oikeni leads the team down to Fortuna's surface for a whole extra act. Wowie! This is conceptually one of the best segments of the entire series. Hands down, it captures all of the exhilaration and spectacle you'd wish for while retaining that old light-hearted charm. And it definitely sells you on the idea that we're back to the classic Lylat Wars formula. That's why it's so curious that Assault abruptly ends this whole scene by a strike of seriosity from left field in the middle of Oikeni's Andros wannabe boss fight.
Oikeni! Uncle Andros! What?
We're not sure people ever caught on to this, but the inciting incident of this game is a Star Fox subversion. After vanquishing the surprise boss, the whole narrative takes a much more dire streak. The older characters show deep concern about this new Aparoid threat, remembering a similar incident years ago, and solving it takes top priority over the Venom conflict. Oikeni and his goons are never heard from again after this, because they do not matter in the shadow of the Aparoids. Narratively, the old familiar antagonist is thrown out the window, exchanged for something new and far more dangerous. But perhaps more cleverly is how Assault uses this opening to switch around the game mechanics. It's usually stated that a good idea for a first level in a video game would be something that introduces the player to all of the core mechanics, showing what they will be doing and how the rest of the experience will build upon and evolve these aspects. And even though some games will display a variety of ideas, they usually start off with the main one. That's why Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 open on Sonic levels before introducing other concepts, for example. In that light, it would make perfect sense for a Star Fox game to open on a bona fide linear Star Fox level. But when all 10 missions are put under scrutiny, it's apparent how Assault is a lot more focused on the evolved form of All Range mode, where Fox traverses on foot in an open area, only occasionally mounting a Landmaster or R-Wing. You could divide this game into a number of sections, perhaps by vehicle or control method, which would be 3 or 5, but considering the series evolution, we think it's more sensible to divide the levels by on-rails and all-range mode. From that perspective, only 3 levels in this game are classic Starwing action, with the other 7 being the new evolved form of Star Fox. And you know, that is a suspiciously small amount. So in light of this overarching structure, the common criticism of there being too few R-Wing levels, and the rug pull of the opening set piece, well gosh, I think this lack of pilot action might be the point. When you observe Star Fox Assault from above, the symmetry of its missions becomes blatantly obvious. The game both starts and ends on an on-rails R-Wing level, with an additional one in the middle. Not only that, they also neatly bookend the 2 main acts and revolve around pursuing and taking down the main villains, Oikini, Pigma, and the Aporoid Queen respectively. You could say that this is how Assault expresses triumph, that final stretch before the end where you get to simply indulge in the sheer joy of spaceship spectacle, a return to normalcy in more than one sense of the word. That's right, Star Fox Assault uses our love of the R-Wing to climax. Gross. Essentially, the opening level is meant to fool you into thinking this is gonna be a Lylat-esque shmup romp, because the callbacks to the old games serve a higher purpose than simply reminding us that this is Star Fox. This is a mechanical depiction of that coveted status quo, which has been put into jeopardy by the Aporoids. The audience, and by extension Fox, want to fly around freely in the R-Wing, return to those old carefree arcade days. But the gravity of the situation won't permit that. As an opening to this game, the Fortuna mission is thus a shockingly clever deception to effectively present the tone and stakes for the rest of the story. Perhaps most telling by how everyone playing Assault felt that narrative shift. The game is commonly described as the darkest after all, but I can't remember hearing anyone specify how it was conveyed through the introduction. Regardless of how much this portion of the game reminds us of Lylat Wars, there are still clearly changes brought forth within it. Aspects like Oikini being in charge or Crystal taking Peppy's place on the team are clear detractions from the old norm, and showcase right off the bat that previous events have still definitely occurred and changed this world. I think going into Assault after Adventures, most players will have their eyes on Crystal in particular, considering how little screen time she had previously and that she'll now be part of the main cast with her own unique personality and chemistry. This is novel and kinda exciting in and of itself. And starting off, she has definitely integrated herself into the crew dynamic. Much like the others, she will shoot down 2 baddies and exclaim "Yoy," walk around in a circle admiring her surroundings and not be able to figure out how to do a loop or hit the brakes when she's in trouble. And that's not a slight on Crystal, mind you, that's just showing she's on an equal level with the rest of the crew. This applies to the banter as well. Crystal takes Peppy's role on the team not only as a pilot, but socially as well. She's the level-headed babysitter of the crew, the one who's more about the mission than goofing around. If Peppy is the dad, Crystal is definitely the mom.
Alright, that's enough, boys.
However, soon the novelty of a new Star Fox member fades into the background. You might say this is a testament to how well she melts into the unit. It's certainly never jarring, but it's hard to shake the feeling that she's mostly included as a formality. She got introduced in the last one, so logically, she should still be around in the next one. No more questions asked. Crystal has personality girl and occupation telepath, because I guess that's what can be inferred by adventures. Instead of building on top of her foundation, the writers sheepishly kept within that small ballpark. I wouldn't call her a liability though. I think they were as excited as anyone else to have a new character on the team, and the reverence to Crystal and the game she came from is obvious with the inclusion of a whole level set on Saria. Saria? You mean like Dinosauria? Yeah, look, there's the architecture, the underground caves, and even a tricky reunion here. They fully embraced how this is now a part of the Star Fox universe. It's cute. A bit awkward within the text that Crystal goes back to her trauma planet, but we should probably see this more as a gesture towards the player more than anything else. I think at the end of the day, they were fully ready to include Crystal in this game, meaning her subdued role is an effect of being a secondary character within the story. All of the Star Fox team are. Crystal having little bearing on the narrative or inclusion in the writing as a member of Star Fox says more about Star Fox than Crystal. Like, what is Crystal's relationship to Falco? What's the jargon there? What do they say to each other? This is a genuine question, because I don't know. That's as much an observation on Crystal as it is Falco. Communication is a two-way street after all. Not even Fox escapes this one. For anyone who has played Star Fox Assault, can you say what Fox's character arc is in this game? I'll give you a second. Ready? If you said accepting Wolf, well, alright. But if you said nothing, you're correct. Because this game is not about Fox McCloud or the Star Fox crew. That title is a filthy lie. This game should have been called Star Wolf Assault, after its true main character, Wolf O'Donnell.
No way! I don't believe it!
Looking at the history of Star Wolf, it's striking how much Assault fleshes out that group and gives us any form of idea about their identity. We're talking Saturday morning cartoon villains to conflicted neutral agents from one day to the next. As stated earlier, the role in Star Fox 2 boils down to simply being the anti-Star Fox, representing everything our heroes were not. The sort of scum sheep enough to take up Andross's offers without question. We do not know of any previous relationship they have with the Star Fox team or even each other. That's not important. They're only here for the paycheck. The evil paycheck. This is vaguely expanded upon in Lylat Wars, but only through little bits and pieces that are only made sense of in hindsight. Algie is replaced by Andrew, and overall the crew are redesigned and given more definition. There is an implied earlier history between Fox and Wolf. Pigma has the context of ex-Star Fox backstabber, and Andrew is the nepotistic recruit. Our impression is that this is a makeshift team assembled by Andross, which makes it hard to see any real camaraderie or mutual respect between them. Like, what is the chemistry between Leon and Andrew? Who knows? Instead of being a tight-knit group, they're more defined as being counters to individual Star Fox members. But even that is kind of dubious. Fox and Wolf being rivals feels more like a reflection of their leadership. Pigma has sour relationships to both Peppy and Fox. Meanwhile, the pitting of Falco versus Leon and Slippy versus Andrew is based on literally nothing. It's wildly incoherent. This didn't really matter, of course, as Star Wolf are still among the most memorable and enjoyable parts of Lylat Wars regardless, simply through them being a fun band of scoundrels crashing the party from time to time. They didn't need to be more than that, and for the most part, that seems to be how Nintendo have treated them since. But the way Assault in particular hones in on the team and prods at their core is simply commendable for how much depth that lends Wolf and his gang. Throughout the 10 levels of the game, Team Star Wolf will show up in 4 of them, one establishing chapter early on, followed by the payoff at the end. The introduction of Starwolf is another one of those instances where Star Fox Assault will play on your Lylat Wars expectations, to then reveal how things have changed since. After the second chapter, the Star Fox team are ready to retrieve an Aporoid core memory from a defeated enemy, essentially a MacGuffin that allows the heroes to track the Aporoid homeworld and confront the final boss. Hearing of the value this item holds, Pigma shows up in his space truck and janks the core memory from under Fox's nose. Chasing after Pigma, the crew hits up the Sargasso Space Zone base, led by Wolf O'Donnell, ignores their radio man stating there is no Pigma there, and proceeds to storm the base and hacking it up. Halfway through, Starwolf comes home and promptly asks them what the hell they're doing. Because Pigma isn't a part of their crew anymore, Fox just came there with decade-old presumptions and shot the place up. Gosh, I guess that's why it's called Star Fox Assault, because Fox raids Wolf's house and murders his friends unprovoked.
We didn't come here to fight with Wolf and his team.
That's easy to say after all you've done.
This whole incident ends up being a big embarrassing blunder on Star Fox's part and gives Wolf a massive moral high ground, which plays into their re-emergence in the story later on, when Corneria is under attack and Wolf lets Fox play turret on his Wolfen. He even observes Fox's weakness at having to attack the Aporoid-possessed General Pepper, but instead of using this against him, Wolf gives Fox advice in the form of one of the most iconic lines in the entire series.
Don't hesitate. When the time comes, just act.
This is followed up by Starwolf helping out with shooting missiles in the Sector C callback level, and then sacrificing themselves to distract the enemy during the final raid on the Aporoid homeworld, ending on a vague conclusion where their fate remains unknown. Although, they're obviously not dead. No one died in this game, except Pigma, I guess, and even he shows up again as a big purple shit cube. What's important here is the gesture. This game shows Fox back at it again after having been gone for 9 years and making brash decisions based on a dated worldview. Wolf basically takes this as a vehicle to show Fox his growth and prove that he was wrong about him. So yeah, Fox may have the arc of leaving those presumptions behind, but it's achieved by Wolf practically stealing the show and making Fox look like an ass. So I'd say this narrative is pretty firmly revolving around Wolf. He's kinda like the misunderstood older brother to Fox, perceived as a deadbeat delinquent. But when push comes to shove, he's pretty chill and cool. I like him. There's a surprising amount of nuance that can be excavated from Wolf simply by comparing this game to his earlier outings. Primarily based around the structure of the Starwolf team, which has switched members since last time and changed allegiance to no one but themselves. In the intervening years, Pigma and Andrew have left and a new recruit Panther has joined, meaning that the core of the band is Wolf and Leon. Think about this for a second. What does that say about Wolf and his character? Presumably, he had been given the reins to these guys by Andros to form a counter Star Fox unit. But after the war, after Andros was out of the picture, Wolf took this crew setup and ran with it. Clearly he saw pride in having his own gang, but at the same time, that gang kinda sucked. So Wolf decides to kick out 2 of his 3 band members. Pigma is a traitorous, greedy scumbag, probably legit dangerous to have around. Andrew is a bootlicking fascist who I'm pretty sure Wolf has always hated anyway. And Leon is supposedly a sadistic murderer. Yet, he's the only one Wolf kept around. Evidently, Wolf is ready to hang out with some pretty shady people, but he definitely draws the line somewhere. I'm pretty sure what Leon has that both Pigma and Andrew lack is integrity and honor. And that also makes me fully believe that Wolf and Leon are genuine friends. It says something that they'd still be companions after this long. And in that light, Panther immediately comes off as a much more agreeable figure than the ex-Starwolf members. I don't sense anything vile or despicable about him. Sure, he's intimidating and works as a mercenary, but that's it. The worst thing he does is flirt with Crystal, and he even backs off when she says she's taken. Panther is a good guy. I think what he has in common with Starwolf is their shared societal position as outcasts. They live off the grid, taking whatever jobs they can, shunned by society but trucking on regardless, always staying true to themselves. Come to think of it, that's kind of funny. If the Borg-like aporoids represent the threat of conformity, explicitly targeting those of weak will to devour into their hive mind, then that kinda suggests Fox has found himself in a position where his presumed place in the world is recontextualized. Lost and confused, he receives guidance from the Starwolf crew, the Misfits previously part of The Other, but suddenly made a lot more human. Because this is their battle. It's a battle they're fighting every day. The pressure to be like the rest, to give in and forfeit your individuality. Wolf sees Fox's inexperience and makes sure he gets out on both feet, in the end sacrificing himself so Fox can assure that the very concepts of free will and self-expression are preserved. That's right, Star Fox Assault is queer! This game is about Fox finding out he's in the closet and getting help from his older peers. Yes, Starwolf are gay! Is it any wonder why people always ship these boys with each other? Looking at it this way, it's pretty clear that Star Fox Assault loves Starwolf. And it kinda made me love Starwolf in a whole new way that's reliant on more than quotable one-liners. I'm genuinely interested in these characters and what path they take from here on out, because they've gone through quite some growth. This seems to be one of the biggest benefits of how Assault approached its narrative. By having events progress further, it suddenly makes sense to allow more room for others. Fox isn't a particularly interesting character here, but that's fine when everything revolving around him is colorful instead.
Apoptosis, huh?
And from what we've gathered, this seems to be the Star Fox story fans like the most. It's that neat blend of new ideas, seriosity, and raised stakes that makes it feel distinct within the series as a whole. The increased linearity gives the narrative a more cinematic pacing and structure. It's focused in that regard. In contrast to the branching paths of the other games, the element of choice seems to be based more on player approach within the levels themselves. You have the expanded selection of weapons and vehicles that will allow for different approaches to the same goals, instead of having those goals be optional. As such, Star Fox Assault is one of the games that places the most premium on its narrative by strictly adhering to it. It's a different beast that prioritizes one riveting run-through rather than being something you come back to again and again. And this together with Star Fox Adventures might have momentarily set the precedent that this series was to be a lot more linear than the classics moving forward. But in hindsight, that was not a cause for concern at all, because as it turns out, the future of the series would be anything else but a straight path.
This is the part where the dogfight begins.
As the Star Fox franchise left the aging GameCube behind for greener pastures, or bluer oceans if you will, it was sort of inevitable that the next game would be a bit different. Nintendo were entering a new era of wacky weird sports controllers and pen-pointing playing machines that would bring distinct novelty to old concepts. And seeing as Star Fox rarely shies away from taking on fresh new ideas, it goes without saying that whatever the sequel to Assault ended up being, it wouldn't be without that trademark, innovation. And so, on a cold European January morning in 2007, Star Fox Command for the Nintendo DS was born. This plucky little space shooter braved a scary new world of video games, all about intuitive control methods. And on that front, it certainly delivers. The spaceships are almost entirely controlled by the touchscreen and makes for some precise, challenging shooting action and easy to manage maneuvers. I know a lot of people hate this stuff, but it has always seemed like an overaction to me considering how well it actually works in the final product. It's like with motion controls, people love to be big babies about the mere suggestion of them. We should remember that touch controls were a bit novel and experimental at the time, when they hadn't yet been implemented in every single cell phone. And in that light, it's honestly impressive how well they managed to make an involved and fast-paced game like Star Fox work with this thing. Most of the time I'm forgetting I'm even using it, and if the goal was to achieve precision on the DS in particular, this was the way to go for implementing both big and small maneuvers. I'm not even going to pretend like these controls are bad to satisfy the ever-present trend of hating on Nintendo's so-called gimmick controls, because I genuinely find Command to be pretty great. In fact, you could even say that it's, coincidentally, the best game ever made. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are other reasons besides the control methods and handheld format for why Command turned out radically different from its peers. You see, it's all in its roots. For the longest time, the shadow of Star Fox 2 had been looming over the series, not only in the sense of it being that unreleased one we never got, but because the presented ideas within kinda lingered like an unfulfilled promise. Star Fox Command finally fulfills that promise by picking up where Star Fox 2 left off and furthering those ideas. There's the open strategic format, complete focus on all range mode, the different characters and the team dynamic, which have been bolstered and expanded from their initial model. This is not that strange either, as Command was directed by Dylan Cuthbert, who had previously been intimately involved in the development of the Argonaut Star Fox games. So, considering these roots and how they now re-emerged, we'd say that Star Fox Command is one of the most Star Fox-ass Star Fox games out there. But that's neither here nor there. We digress. This game is, however, not a simple rehash of the concepts that Star Fox 2 attempted to introduce in 1996. The 10 years that had passed since then are palpable throughout the entire experience, in how it learned from and expanded upon other aspects that defined the games that came before it, to carve its own niche. It's a fascinating mix of both old and new in one solid package, a more compact and bite-sized one to fit the format, while also being surprisingly hefty with content. Like, if you thought Star Fox 2's 6 playable characters was impressive for a Star Fox game, then that's peanuts compared to Command's 14. Essentially anyone you'd expect is in here, ranging between fan favorites to fresh recruits. These newcomers include Andros' grandson Dash, who adds a moral conundrum to the simplistic dogs and monkeys conflict, as well as Lucy and Amanda, who serve as sorely needed additions to the lacking lineup of women. Granted, these gals are still not a massive bunch, but at least they're able to fill out a squadron of their own this time, with both Kat Monroe and Crystal returning. And it's not just about filling out the cast. These girls and Dash are introduced by you actually controlling them in their own unique spacecraft, meaning that apart from them enriching the narrative, they're also immediately relevant and helpful to the player's mission. In that way, Command takes the core value of space animals to heart and brings the series to a whole new level, while further exploring the many scenarios they find themselves in. While Assault already upped the space drama significantly, Command, on the other hand, becomes a full-on soap opera filled with personal intrigue, relationship quarrels, and life-altering events, all presented through talking heads dialogue. It takes the branching paths that the series' early outings are known for and applies them in a new way to create a more sprawling narrative that the entire ensemble cast can partake in. It's a choose-your-own-adventure kind of game. In a lot of ways it has more in common with a visual novel than it does Lylat Wars, which is a bold move on paper, but in practice, it makes so much sense that you barely notice it. While choices that lead you to different combat scenarios were a part of previous titles, this one is less about the encounters themselves, and more so about where those routes take our characters emotionally. Lylat Wars, for example, does lead you to many locations with unique battles, but no matter how many times these paths branch out, the story always narrows at its conclusion to end the exact same way. The paths you take in Command, on the other hand, all have vastly different outcomes to where our characters end up and what their futures hold. It's a clever way of changing up this system, to have it focus more on the lived experiences of the colorful cast of furries, rather than who gets to have a new asshole torn at the end of a level. Command kicks off sometime after Assault and begins with the Star Fox team having disbanded at least 2 years before, with the members now living new lives scattered across the Lylat system. It's a simple case of life taking unexpected turns and people making unfortunate mistakes. Slippy left the flying gig when he met his girlfriend Amanda, Peppy became the new general of the Cornerian army, and Falco once again decided to fly solo like he did before the events of Adventures. Where the true drama of the game comes from, however, is the relationship between Crystal and Fox, who previously both fell in love and promised each other to stay together forever. But in a misguided sense of wariness, Fox tries to protect his love from danger by forcing her to leave the team against her will, instead making her disappear out of his life completely, heartbroken and ashamed. Which leaves Fox alone to contemplate his actions and how everything turned out like this. This is a Star Fox game all about the main character having a midlife crisis. It's brilliant. With how the narratives of the previous games kept on trucking forward in time, it makes sense that this would be a topic explored at some point. The characters are aging, they surely can't keep on doing this forever, so eventually the team was bound to break up for one reason or another. Here it's mostly a neat justification for deploying the common trope of the hero getting the band back together again to face a new threat. In this case, the funky fish people known as the Anglars. But most important is how this creates a blank slate starting point for the story to then branch out from. Fox is not necessarily the person that we start out with just because he's already been established as the main character before, but because it addresses a lot about the core dynamic of these characters. Slowly, we've come to learn that the members of Team Star Fox all have other stuff going for them. Peppy already had years of work experience and was bound for that promotion. Slippy always made more sense for R&D since the beginning.
Apoptosis, huh?
And Falco seems like he mostly used the team as an excuse to fly. But Fox is still at it because this is the only thing he has. Before this, Fox had always been the straight man audience stand-in for the action. He's not so much part of the banter as he's on the receiving end of it. Most of the time the characters are reacting to what Fox is doing, not what he's saying. Because of that, there was never any need to fully characterize him apart from maintaining a set of agreeable attributes like being optimistic, level-headed, supportive, and charming enough to occasionally pull a badass one-liner.
Sorry to jet, but I'm in a hurry.
It's a guy most people are willing to play as, and that especially worked for all the times when he was the only option. That also means that the balance of shifting all the player action towards an actual character within the narrative will inadvertently affect how we are to view said character. The Star Fox series never gets self-aware enough to address the players themselves, so the logical conclusion is that Fox himself is a little bit overbearing and overprotective according to the text. He's always had that streak about him. In Lylat Wars, he takes on Andros alone. In Adventures, he's the only one who lands on the planet. And in Assault, he volunteers anytime there's a ground mission.
By yourself? It's too dangerous. I'm going too.
No.
I guess the irony is that the way Star Fox as a series wanted to depict you as the leader of a cool flying unit clashes with the old saying that there is no I in team. We may poke fun at how like 99% of the work in these games is always done by the player and how that reflects on the value of the other team members all day, but it is an interesting subject to textually bring up in the games themselves. As such, it follows that Fox would force Crystal to leave the team to protect her, while shouldering the entire business by himself. Because, like it or not, it's consistent with his character. He's already lost a loved one in battle before, and metatextually, he can do this on his own. Because the player has always been able to. In a way, this is never mechanically remedied either. There is no shift in the game's dynamic to make the player themselves feel like part of a bigger unit. However, the framing is absolutely affected by how you are now allowed to play as different characters, sometimes in teams that don't even include Fox at all. With this in mind, we can conclude that while being one of the main characters and the starting point, Command allows us to distance ourselves from Fox and for once view him from an outside perspective. He's part of a greater whole now. The player disconnects, sort of humbling him to not be the center of the universe anymore. And I think this is essential to fully understand how Fox is portrayed here, as this is the first time where Fox as a character is problematized somewhat. But that's never done at the cost of the player, because you're not meant to project upon him to the same extent anymore. The whole idea of protecting others who don't need protection while thinking he can do everything on his own is one thing, the specific details is another. It's especially telling how the regular route quickly shows us that Fox has no issue with letting his old pals Slippy and Falco on the team again. But the history with Crystal and his doubt towards Peppy's daughter Lucy is a pretty harrowing contrast. It seems that Star Fox as a boys' club got internalized pretty hard in his head, and that has led him to underestimate and devalue others based on superficial aspects like gender. We're not exaggerating when we say that Fox McClown over here is showing some blatant signs of toxic masculinity, which is a pretty interesting direction for a Nintendo franchise to go in. Even more so when that initial first regular run-through inevitably leads to an ending where, despite seemingly owning up to his mistakes, everything falls apart anyway, and Fox is once again confronted with the faults of his worldview and behavior. The band might have set their differences aside to accomplish a goal, but the conflict has clearly not been solved in any meaningful way, as Fox is still haunted by complicated feelings over Crystal. Our main guy is basically stuck in his old ways and can't get past it, which is very much reflected in how strictly linear this part of the game is. At every intersection of the first run, we are shown the options, but are locked out from making a choice. Meaning this is the one playthrough the developers really wanted players to see. It's definitely the most dissatisfying ending, not necessarily for Crystal who gets to become a queer Starwolf pilot, but at least from a Fox perspective, and forcing that upon a first play session seems like a method for heavily incentivizing players to have another go, to explore the various routes. However, it can equally be read as an observation about the state of the narrative, that this whole playthrough is an extended starting point to paint a full picture of Fox as a conflicted, problematic character with major faults, headed towards his own demise. It's only once we've observed this that we're then literally given the key of destiny to change the narrative ourselves. The fate of Fox and his companions has been entrusted to you. This is pretty great stuff. Although, we have to wonder how many people just kinda took this as a one-and-done deal and judged the game based on that. The old save on this used copy had only played through it once, reaching the regular bummer ending and called it a day. Since that player sold the game to us, we can surmise that at least one person out there thought this was the full scope of Command. Wow, boy did they miss out! Now, I don't think it's necessary to play through all 9 routes and see every single ending, but it feels pretty obvious that your engagement with Command is meant to at least span a few more playthroughs where you strive to end up with something more satisfying than what you first got. That is the arc presented here, and I suppose it might have been a little bit out there for some people that the conclusion is purely in your hands. You're essentially traveling through time, retreading your steps to make your own choices, and reach an ending that feels right and satisfying to you. There is no real or true ending here, it's your choice. And as such, the fate of these characters is left open-ended, up in the air for you to decide. Every outcome forms the playground for you to work within, to aid Fox in his never-ending quest to save the day, leave the past behind him, learn to rely on others, and perhaps even win over Crystal. that white rabbit he has perpetually chased through every playthrough, spanning many different lives, possible futures, and vital life decisions to make right what has been wronged. A year after this, some guy called Jonathan Blow made a game about a little man bending time itself to win over a girl, and people called him a genius for it. I guess those people never played Star Fox Command. What a bunch of posers! So in your second playthrough, you'll likely explore those options previously unavailable to you, see how the story unfolds in new ways, and receive another ending. This one will be vastly different, because the narrative really twists and turns in unexpected ways. What this mostly means is that your second go will probably feel a lot more satisfying than the first, and by that strengthen the idea of the alternate endings as a vessel. Every outcome is then logged in the main menu, and it's truly striking how little emphasis is placed on how they are ordered. The first one you get is number 3, just kinda off center from the middle. Number 1 is admittedly a pretty standard fare where the team are back together again with a cliffhanger setup, while the last one, number 9, is a goofy what-if scenario. The ending that fans like to point to as the true and happiest is number 2, just hanging out there. Then in this one, Fox and Crystal have a son, opening for a new generation to have even more adventures. So I guess it is the happiest one. If you ignore generational trauma and the prospect of perpetual war, Marcus may very well die just like his grandpappy, just another cog in the machine. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, right, Mama Crystal. She's a recurring element here, as several endings will in some way try to answer the question on whether she and Fox get together again or not. For the most part, they do. But the open nature of these threads and the seeming unwillingness for the game to place much value on one over the other means that the exact circumstances are perpetually up in the air. And I truly feel that the uncertainty, inconsistency, and possibility is the point. Through this butterfly effect, it makes perfect sense that characters like Crystal or Andross's grandson Dash can go from cooperating with Star Fox just fine to becoming outright antagonists. And when it comes to Crystal specifically, her connection to our main guy makes her a prime candidate to drive these kinds of stories. The fact that she's such a wild card in these outcomes plays into the theme of life's paths and succinctly exemplifies the fragility of love. Really, the relationship between Fox and Crystal is pretty much the core conflict of this game, with the Anglar threat being petty background noise to the real drama. They're the guys that you shoot to get to the good parts where these two bicker and argue about their past. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you. This is everything I have wanted ever since Star Fox Adventures. Like, at least something, anything had to come out of that game's strange portrayal of Crystal eventually. And while Command doesn't necessarily do anything radical, it at least attempts to question their fairy tale romance a little bit, with the circumstances surrounding them falling in love and her being just a teenager when they first met. It's perfectly valid to have a story where that all breaks down. We shouldn't assume that they're meant to be together simply because Fox saved her and they exchanged a few lustful looks. Which is why it's so great to see this addressed through Fox being a bit of a toxic control freak, who has to be told off by his friends and apologize for his actions. Nintendo off-screened their entire relationship twice, and now, when it's falling apart, it's like, no shit, not even the writers wanted to commit to it. To my surprise though, I found out that there is a subset of fans who deeply hate Star Fox Command. Apart from the touch controls, the biggest contention seems to be the writing, commonly focused around the cast supposedly being out of character. In particular, there's the claim that this game somehow ruined Crystal with his relationship drama, which is a bit funny to me because that statement implies that there is a lot about her that could be tarnished to begin with. But I don't believe that to be remotely true. Like I said before, I don't think there is much to Crystal as a character at all. She was always the typical girl archetype of the group, supposedly kind and clever, with some added suggestive eyes as a bonus. What Command does is merely give her some more to work with, some added sides of her personality that you might not expect, and a bit of extra agency to choose for herself after Fox bossed her around. She's a lesbian now. A lot of people seem to be taking offense to the sheer notion that there could even be drama between these two characters. Like this deleted Reddit user, for example.
If Fox did for some reason kick her, she probably would have talked to him about it and he'd let her stay.
This absolute rejection of anything even resembling conflict is baffling to me. What do you mean, just talk about it? Bub, that's the inciting incident of the game right there. I get the sense that there is a reluctance to even entertain or engage with the suggestion that main character Fox McCloud could ever do anything wrong. Because he's a good guy, the hero. Fox is a reasonable person, and therefore he would never find himself in this situation. Right. It's this static idea of these guys as flat and unchangeable cardboard cutouts. Anything else would apparently be out of character. And this is especially true for how people have interpreted Crystal in this game. On the contrary, Star Fox Command makes Crystal. This is the only time she gets to be an actual person with, thoughts, feelings, ideas, drive, and initiative. She gets booted off the team by her shitty boyfriend and leaves to make a life of her own. She joins the only other available flying crew apart from the Cornerian Cop unit, and that inevitably changes her. Of course it makes sense that she would become a meaner, gruffer person after hanging out with the Starwolf gang while lingering on her sadness and anger. This is obvious. Like we said in the beginning of this entire video, Starwolf is the anti-Star Fox team. They're the complete opposite. And joining up with them means that you get the entire package, baby. We have seen so many people lament how Crystal changed, became rude, and got together with a criminal like bisexual trans man Panther Caroso.
He's a mercenary. How could she learn to love him?
Well, no shit, you Reddit dork. So is Fox, and you don't have a problem with that. Did you even play the game? Playing through all the games in succession, like we have, it absolutely follows that this would happen. There is nothing out of character here. She simply moved on after her Star Fox days and became someone else. Such is life. I'd fuck Panther too, because look at him. He's a real hunk of a man. And as he says, all who see his rose meet his big d. Most important perhaps is that her attitude is mostly aimed towards Fox. And why wouldn't it be? It's not like she didn't want to be on Star Fox. I don't get the feeling that Crystal is behaving like this just for the sake of it. It's more so her being influenced by her new environment and in direct response to how Fox treated her. And I guess that's not only prior to the events of Command either, but throughout the entire series. Their relationship started with him oogling her unconscious inside Crystal stasis. We were bound for this sooner or later. I rather get the impression, and this is just an impression mind you, that the disdain towards Command Crystal at least partly is rooted in something else. I think a vital question to ask here is, out of the entire cast, why Crystal in particular? Could it be that she, as the female lead of the franchise, isn't doing what she's supposed to do? It's kind of like the Skylar White situation in Breaking Bad. Crystal is seen as being a bit of a bitch towards our main character, presumably because of her confrontational attitude that puts a wrench in the typical Fox-centric team dynamic. The biggest crime she committed is that she did not conform. She did not stick to the script and didn't stay in her place. She should have been nice and quiet and not upset the fragile ego of famous good guy and hero, Fox McCloud. In one of the endings, Crystal devises a plan together with the Starwolf crew that will clear their names once and for all. The plan works, and they manage to steal the victory of defeating the Angler Emperor from under the Star Fox team's noses. They save the day and become the new heroes of Lylat. The Starwolf squad is relieved of their past crimes and can finally show their faces in public again. But Crystal is not as lucky. Despite everyone being equally involved in screwing over Star Fox, she's the only one who faces harsh criticism and scrutiny. Why couldn't she have talked to Fox about it? How could she do something so heinous towards her old friends? As the only woman of the group, she's treated differently from the rest and gets shunned by society, because there evidently seems to be higher standards expected of her. She didn't conform. People hate this ending because it's the one where Crystal ends up changing identity and calls herself Cursed with a K. It's a bit of a silly ending for sure, but the parallels to her treatment by some fans is striking. Prophetic and ironic, really. Heck, if I didn't know better, I'd say Command was written in response to itself. At the end of the day, it's funny to me how this one game that finally looked at the full Star Fox narrative with sober eyes and started prodding at its seams would be this controversial, when really it's one of the most healthy and cool treatments of the series imaginable. If you think about it, the whole squabble between Fox and Crystal is practically just a logical way to portray the underlying conflict between how the games are played and how the story is diminished by it. Remember, Crystal's presence is essentially the promise of continuity and change within his narrative, while Fox is the old audience stand-in, pushing through these tales on his own like Score Hunt arcade romps. Fox telling Crystal to stay in the kitchen and make a sandwich is no different to the player mocking Slippy for getting in trouble, or snickering at Falco getting like 4 guys in an entire playthrough. At least in this game, we get to fly Slippy's dope-ass battleship that eats up enemies like dessert, or experience firsthand how much it sucks to be Falco with the smallest health bar all the way from Ficina to Katina. This is the first Star Fox game that made me fully appreciate the rest of the crew. It is certainly the only game apart from Dinosaur Planet where I truly liked Crystal at all. For being a game that is so enamored with the entire Star Fox series like this, it's straight up hilarious to imagine it as some form of fandom poison. Command gives us the keys to the kingdom and allows us to fully explore this wide cast thoroughly to our heart's content. This is achieved both by being able to play as them, but also in the many views we get into their potential futures. Star Fox Command is remarkably uninterested about the status quo and would rather have us imagine the possibilities. It's not a game that you're supposed to look at with a gamer-brained idea of canonicity, because that's besides the point. As we said, there is no quote-unquote real or true ending to the events of Command, and that's to its benefit. Only in a game like this will we see Falco form his own crew, Slippy grow a beard on an island, or our favorite boys become gay F-Zero racers. There's a freaking ending that has girl power written all over it in bold letters. It's silly, but great. In contrast to the shockingly linear adventures in Assault, Command fully embraces this idea of open-endedness. Storylines will divert in ways that are inconsistent with each other to reach outcomes that range everywhere between comedy and seriosity. And that's completely by design. If there is one thing Star Fox Command fully understands about the series, it's to not take itself too seriously, recognize the melodrama and hone into it fully with a slew of Elseworld stories. If your biggest concern here is the inability to conflate it all into a flat narrative to know what really happened, I think you're sorely missing the point. This is a Star Fox game that employs the series' staple branching paths upon its own narrative to reflect on the franchise's history and future. I think the uncertainty of Command's endings is reflective of this series as a whole. This string of continuity that had piled on top of itself since Lylat Wars, together with diminishing sales, was surely reaching a breaking point. how much longer could they keep it up? As an introspective self-examination, Command is like a last hurrah for this era of Star Fox history, embracing its uncertain future and giving closure that was equally open-ended. With that in mind, regardless if they had planned to continue on with this thread or not, it's beneficial that Star Fox Command is functionally the last game in the old continuity. Obviously, there was no way they would ever write a definitive ending to Star Fox. After all, this franchise will keep going long after we're all dead, but at least this feels like apt closure. It's likely the closest we'll ever get. As such, we end like we started, on an intersecting path with the future wide open with possibility. We are merely given glimpses of the many outcomes these characters could end up at, never given anything firm to fully hold on to. And that's quite poetic. Perhaps it could be read as the pondering Fox does over his life path. It's a midlife crisis not only textually, but structurally and intertextually. It's a game made by people who, much like Fox himself, had those old glory days behind them, and no real idea where the franchise was headed next. I think it shines through, and makes the whole experience relatable and human in ways no other Star Fox game had ever been before, or ever since for that matter. When this came out, we were 15 years old, with no broader perspective on Star Fox other than cool spaceships and funny animals. This game didn't particularly appeal to us back then, and for years it was written off completely, filed in the back of our minds as that weird touchscreen one with the goofy, tacky endings. But looking back at it now, 15 years later, it's strikingly potent at addressing some themes that were incomprehensible to us as kids, out of our concern altogether. Suddenly, we find so much to appreciate here, with the realization that this is stuff we'd never have truly caught on to at the time. In a way, Star Fox ended that day. We even got handed a perfectly satisfying conclusion, but we couldn't even recognize it as such. All we saw were funky controls and a narrative we couldn't make heads or tails of, with only one disappointed thought lingering in our heads.
Damn! I wish this was more like the one on Nintendo 64.
The name's Fox. Fox McCloud. My father is dead. My mother is also dead.
It turns out that you should be careful what you wish for. You see, in a monkey paw-like situation, our 15-year-old selves eventually got exactly what they wanted. After Command released, we would receive absolutely nothing but worship and nostalgic callbacks to the Nintendo 64 classic. In 2011 there was a Lylat Wars remake with the strangely generic name Star Fox 64 3D. Weird that they would change it, but whatever. Then later in 2016, they finally rebooted the entire franchise with Star Fox Zero, which in practice meant having a go at also reimagining Lylat Wars for good measure. And then there was the odd cameo appearance in the 2018 Ubisoft software application Starlink that gave us this plastic monstrosity.
What is this? Skylanders?
In particular, it features a little Star Fox story that clearly returns to the old black and white contrast between Fox and Wolf, as seen in games like, you guessed it, Lylat Wars. These may just be free games, but they're a stark contrast from what came before and makes their purpose clear. We're talking about an entire decade of a series desperately clamoring for the past, in a misguided desire to crawl back into the primordial soup. And we know that a lot of people really wanted this to happen, because we did too. After all, that's the signal we gave Nintendo by ceaselessly citing Lylat Wars as the only good one for years. However, I think it's fair to say that not only were our teenage baby selves completely missing the mark on what we wanted, but Nintendo were also way off on what we actually needed. When people say that they want another Lylat Wars, they might not know exactly what that means, but I sincerely don't think that they want that game again and again. It mostly seems to be another way of saying they want a step back for Star Fox to regain itself, something simple and straightforward in game design without too many new ideas or novel control methods. What Nintendo instead gave us feels like severe overcorrecting that mixes up desires and ends up satisfying no one. And it would seem that from now on, Fox is horrifically nailed to his R-Wing forever, while the narrative and presentation is on long-term vacation. And that does throw a spanner into our work, this video to be more precise. I mean, we're 2 hours into this thing and then suddenly our subject essentially disintegrates into dust. I think you can appreciate the situation we have found ourselves in. What more can be said when Star Fox decides to become the video game equivalent of those clip show episodes from The Simpsons or Friends? Nothing was what we said in an earlier draft of this script, after which the video just kinda ended. We seriously reached a point where the closing chapter could have just been the Lilith Wars section from way back in the beginning, repeated about 2 or 3 times. Which is supremely weird. These newer games fulfill a promise of perpetual stagnation, reverting their premise into always being Fox in a spaceship, shooting down a giant monkey head, forever overcoming the trauma of his father's passing, like a twisted furry Sisyphus, pushing that goddamn Landmaster up the Titania Hill. Corneria has become his personal purgatory, the green hill of the Lilith system, every branching path looping back on itself. This is the new Super Mario Bros.ification of Star Fox. Now clearly, rebooting a long-running narrative that spans several widely different games on defunct consoles is not an inherently bad idea, and could probably be beneficial for reworking the structure and ironing out a few kinks. God knows Star Fox could use some of that. But going back to Lilith Wars in particular, a game that is essentially a reboot already, and adhering to it religiously with barely any new ideas is, in academic terms, pretty fucking boring. Creatively bankrupt, the bare-bones obligatory backdrop to whatever funky game mechanics Nintendo wants to try out this time. If we were any other YouTube channel, we'd probably analyze the umbilical relationship between this baby hacker robot and its helicopter mama, but sadly, that's a luxury we're not permitted. There is nothing else for us to see here than absence, a statement of how Nintendo designed their double redo. Because while they may pretend to go back to 1997, the rest of us are still left in the present. Despite trying really hard to exist in a time bubble, Star Fox Zero is still understood and engaged with from the context of the other games that came before it. It can repeat lines and scenarios of a beloved classic as much as it wants, but as long as those other games are experienced and remembered, there are comparisons begging to be made here. This is a roundabout way of saying that while we're not annoyed about them trying to recapture the magic of our childhood, I mean Nintendo does this all the time, we still find the omissions such a decision came with quite glaring. It's a huge shame that a rebooted Star Fox didn't pull more from its wider universe to craft something more exciting. A fresh start brings with it complete freedom to go in new directions, unshackled from the weight of adhering to what came before it. Aside from wanting to make the most vanilla Star Fox experience they could imagine, there was nothing actually stopping them from adding some chocolate chip, strawberry, or licorice to this mundane sundae. I think it's easy to get lost in the small details when talking about this. A game like Zero on its own doesn't say much. The 3DS game being a remake makes its choices self-evident, and Starlink's spin-off cameo status deflects most criticism. In fact, they are all completely fine games that sufficiently accomplish their goals on their own. It's not until taken together that these three form a striking statement on the series' identity and prospects. They are the 1-2-3 death punch of a franchise that has seen no new narrative idea since Göran Persson was Prime Minister. Solidifying in their own unique little way how Star Fox is not meant to be much else than these 4 animated GIFs superimposed over a 3D spaceship. This is the divine status quo, the irreplaceable codex that is never to be questioned, distilled brand identity. And in that way, it's difficult to make out if Zero is truly meant to be seen as a reboot, or just an expression of what this series was always perceived to be for an audience just tangentially familiar with it. So when a game like Star Fox Zero rewinds the clock 2 decades, it's reducing that intervening time as trivial. In many ways, it ignores the thoughts and ideas that games like Adventures, Assault and Command brought with them in an alarmingly uncritical way. And this is not just about lore and canonicity. It's a bit bigger than that. Star Fox isn't merely made boring because we lose Fox's development or his dynamic with Crystal. That absence does, however, leave a hole that is not filled with anything else, and the few bits we are left with are skipping like a broken record. I think it's fair to say that the Star Fox games from the aughts were all bespoke not only to Lylat Wars, but also each other, actively building upon what came before. And perhaps most vital is the question of diversity. Crystal's journey from Adventure to Command may have been needlessly bumpy, but it did arrive at something eventually, as she's joined by a few more female characters to spice up the universe. To a lesser degree, this applies to how the rest of the cast were given further individuality and complexity, perhaps even highlighting questions around the structure of the narrative. By instead using Lylat Wars as a Bible template, characterizations are reduced to their basics, while anything not part of that sphere is obliterated. It's a curious observation to make, because it poses some clear questions. If only the stuff that was already present in Lylat Wars is allowed to be, how will Star Fox ever evolve and renew itself? And what ingredient is lost in that revision? If only the characters present back in 1997 are allowed to be part of this franchise, who is being actively omitted by that decision? The awkward answer being the women. Like all of them. We're seriously back at late 90s standards for female representation. Kat is once again the Smurfette, carrying this entire franchise on her own, with like 2 seconds of screen time. This isn't just a problem inherent to Star Fox Zero either, it merely exemplifies something that has been recurring since the very beginning. The truth is that Star Fox as a series has a fundamental lack of women, and the few that make it into the games seem to always end up being pushed aside, one way or the other. Miu and Faye were cut before their debut, Kat just disappeared for a few games after Lylat Wars, Crystal was meant to be a main character, but was reduced to a simple damsel in distress in favor of the male lead, and Amanda and Lucy never even stood a chance when the series was rebooted. What Zero does is simply remind us of how disposable and insignificant the women of Star Fox truly are, by basically scrapping every single one of them except for one. Whatever their inclusion contributed was ultimately expendable. It truly puts into perspective how dominated these games are by dudes on every side of the conflict, and how little effort is placed on mending that huge, gaping, girl-shaped hole in the cast. Command wasn't by any means perfect in this regard either, but at the very least it was trying to move in the right direction and remedy some of the problem. Only going backwards from there without a single attempt to diversify the character gallery is just absolutely baffling to me. Like, only one woman? Are you kidding me? None of these could be women? No? Only the one from a Lylat War? Foxglove's strange cousin? Is that it? Alright, sure. I do think it must be stated how this streamlining of the Star Fox presentation by adhering to a model from decades past, perhaps inadvertently, creates a very specific vision of what kind of place the Lylat system is, and who is allowed room within it. It's the same form of uncritical thinking that keeps placing Princess Peach in Bowser's clutches time and again. This idea that Nintendo's landmark classics are immortal and timeless. devoid of any deeper criticism. What we are getting at is that by limiting the representation in particular, Star Fox Zero, in being the only conventionally new and full game in over 15 years, spectacularly fails to address the changing video game landscape during that period, instead reverting even further back in ways that are less retro and more regressive. Put simply, with this revised brand identity, Nintendo seems to have solidified a target demographic for Star Fox as small boys who think spaceships are cool. As women ourselves, that is certainly regrettable, but not surprising. We are used to this happening, and that may make us treat the decision more lightly than we should. Truthfully though, I think comparing this evolution to how most other game franchises have tried to broaden their appeal over the years makes Star Fox stick out as a serious case for when the idea of opening up the gaming room becomes needlessly resistant, as this is not just a case of something neglecting to move forward, but actively moves backwards by intently omitting a lot of the previous evolution. People like to point to Star Fox as a dead franchise, and in some sense, that might have some truth to it. The series has certainly not had much drive behind it in years, meandering in the memory of itself, and only sporadically dropping a new game that fans are moderately interested in. The old narrative that concluded with Command is most definitely dead, and that equally applies to a lot of the characters or depictions within. This doesn't really faze us though. We've long since accepted that thread to be over. Right now, we are more concerned about future prospects, because we think this series has only scratched the surface of its potential. We are even fine with never seeing Crystal again, as long as that entails new ideas supplementing her absence. Or maybe just bring back Neo and Faye, I don't know, maybe that's a good idea, I don't know. As things stand, I guess the series is on life support, fiddling about in the corner it's stuck in. Is Zero the final death knell for the franchise, representing how not even a clean slate can save it? Or was it a weird experiment for a failing system, dead on arrival? We've been through this song and dance before, and can safely say that Star Fox Zero is for the moment merely the most maligned game in the series since the last malign one. The notion that Star Fox is dead has been a constant discourse since 2002, when Adventures first upended the status quo. Every game released in the last 20 years has been the death of Star Fox according to someone. I've heard people say that about all of them. It seems that declaring Star Fox dead is one of the fandom's favorite pastimes, finding a scapegoat to pinpoint the exact moment everything went south, and then perpetuating that as the gospel. Needless to say, we find that mindset to be both silly and slightly destructive, as it constructs arbitrary boundaries for what Star Fox can and cannot be. Particularly, the reverence for Lylat Wars seems to have gotten fans hung up on the idea of R-Wings and shooting down other spacecraft. So we get obviously bespoke gestures that simplify the presentation to revolve solely around that core, and in the process sacrificing the narrative and its vibrant characters, leaving very little spice to distract the player from a now exposed game concept. And I think it's fair to say that it didn't pay off at all. I think the harsh reality is that Star Fox as a game about 3D aircraft with little laser beams might not be especially appealing to a general audience. During these last 2 decades, the series hasn't performed particularly well, despite numerous attempts. It may be one of Nintendo's big franchises culturally, but absolutely not financially. And I don't think that is because the series went to weird places or embraced outlandish control methods. I think what Star Fox might truly be missing is the conviction to fully modernize itself. Fans may have to be content with the idea that what they want isn't necessarily going to work with a wider audience in this day and age. It's not 1993 anymore. I don't think the concept of a simple arcade-style shoot-'em-up has the same traction as it did back then, no matter if it's like Lylat Wars or not. In fact, during an interview with Miyamoto back when the original Star Fox game was released, he actually expressed concerns about audiences writing off this new title, because already at that time, the shoot-'em-up genre was perceived as being on a decline. That was 29 years ago. I feel confident in saying that shmups have never swung back into widespread popularity since. Rather, the core concept of shooting targets evolved into new solutions more appealing to broader audiences. If Star Fox is to modernize itself, the series might have to compromise its roots and at least meet halfway. Because the only way this series dies is through stubborn adherence to a past that apparently can never be meaningfully returned to. Paradise Lost and all that. I suppose our main gripe with this regressive strive and how much it has affected the franchise is that it redefines Star Fox through neglect, narrowing its identity down to ridiculously rigid measurements. By instead taking our particular perspective on the franchise and being open to its many twists and turns, we've embraced how the boundaries once kept being pushed in all kinds of directions. There is nothing mechanically coherent between two games like Lylat Wars and Star Fox Adventures, yet there is clearly something else in there that draws people in and has them return for more. As such, we could very well point to the presentation as a key component to the series' charm. Those core values, space travel, space animals, and space drama, are intentionally broad to encompass every game in the series. And we feel that is a very positive thing. By this we can see that the stories can be both melodramatic and lighthearted, that the cast can be goofy caricatures or complex individuals. And yes, even that the framing never necessitates being Arwing centric. With that in mind, it's clear that Star Fox can be so much more than what popular opinion demands. Like, I guess they have one shot at making another 3D rail shooter with a conventional control scheme before even that novelty is gone. And then what? Just keep repeating that ad nauseum? What a dull future. We'd like to take a final look back at Star Fox 2, the intended second installment of the series that worked hard to surpass the limits of the Super Nintendo. This was a game wholly designed around the prospect of evolving the core concepts in all kinds of wacky and interesting ways, taking on real-time strategy elements explored through open dogfighting arenas with a wide cast of pilots to choose from. Heck, your spacecraft is a transformer, momentarily morphing into a little bipedal robot. And it's freaking amazing! How depressing is it to realize that apart from the grave-robbed Walker, this title is still pretty far out there for the series standards? That its seeds of creation were snuffed out long ago and painted as a detriment to the series' integrity by being the first game to challenge the norms. A characteristic which made it have more in common with the later Adventures Assault and Command than its contemporaries. At the end of the day, I think these games present a very valuable alternate side of Star Fox's identity, that of bold experimentation and fearless rejection of convention. A sliver of that lives on in the series' infamous esoteric control methods, and I guess the excellent Star Fox Guard, in which you as yourself become employed by Slippy's creepy capitalist Uncle Grippy to defend mining bases from cute-looking robots. How he got that name, I do not want to know. But the point is that while something like this scrappy little spin-off does a lot of what we are asking for, being bold and somewhat unhinged, we'd argue that attitude used to be so much more prevalent, affecting narrative, presentation, the whole package. Say what you will about overall quality, but in those days, Star Fox was at least never conceptually boring. What's a little bit reassuring is that Nintendo are surprisingly close to once again hitting the nail on its head by simply realizing that the broader strengths of the series transcend the space action. It's telling that our favorite piece of Star Fox media during the last decade was the tie-in animated short they released together with Zero, primarily because it hones in on the characters and their dynamic in a pleasant and satisfying way. It feels exciting to see these guys goof around on a spaceship together, and this makes me confident that Nintendo still has everything they need to make Star Fox fresh and exciting again. I do think this series is way bigger than only being about shooting shit in a fighter yet. The Lylat system is a sprawling space with all kinds of places and faces. It's a world we'll never get tired of revisiting again and again. And maybe from that perspective, we should allow Star Fox to be a little bit more than just dogs and monkeys fighting.
Hello! Thanks for watching this ridiculously long video all the way to the end. If you made it this far, you must love Star Fox as much as us. And just to clarify one more time, we do actually like all Star Fox games. It's just that our opinion on them might seem harsher when viewed from the perspective of narrative and presentation. There are no actual bad Star Fox games, they're all a fun time in their own way, just so you know, that's our opinion, we don't hate them. Sorry for the catastrophically long time we had to wait for this video. It was a whole lot of work and effort, essentially like making about 3 or 4 regular videos in one go. Now we don't particularly enjoy being away that long, so we're gonna try to get the next one out in a good time to restore our schedule, which got completely messed up by this one. It'll probably be about an obscure Pokemon game, unless Alicia writes something else faster than me, which she won't. I did just realize Yusuke isn't in this video. We gotta complain about that one, so let's rectify that. Can we get Yusuke on screen? There we go! Look at that goober! So, as per the nature of making something longer than we've ever made before, the amount of things that didn't make the cut and things to talk about behind the scenes has increased exponentially. Apart from the regular audio companion, Alicia is working on a full-on bonus video of thoughts and ideas that just didn't fit in the main one. Both of these should be out for all Patreons in due time. Speaking of, let's read out the names of our supporters. Fursuit Challenge. I went through the list earlier and it should include everyone who made a pledge since the last video, so here we go. Thank you. So, let's see here. Supercharge, CEO of 9V, All Purpose Nobody, Athayet, Ben Clark, BBD Bitch, Kota the Hyena, Dave Pickett, Ember, Emrasa, Fran Rogers, Gage McColgan, Intungeon, Kiddy Kong Facts, Klaus Morals, Matthias Graman, MeowMix64, Mary Mellow, Mr. Talius, Mosling, Nate Kiernan, Nishvat, TV Skyen, Vox, Abigail Nail, Ice, Andreas, Anonymous, Aria Soria, Eric Parkinson, Aurora Knaut, Ava Jeanette, Billy Moran, Botch Frivar, Charles Goldhaber, Chloe, Chloe Strange, Cody Sis, Dr. Pumpgusher Esquire, Lisa Tantevi, Ephemeral Mist, Erin Olivia, Ferros Feline, Floofquist, Gabface, Henrik, Il Caesar, Indigo Trans, Infernal Ramblings, Yay Mission, Jelly God, Joel Nilsson, Catherine Jibes, Kiki Silvi, Kirubsi, Linen, Marika, Marby, Max Miller, Mike Nigrelli, Mitch Haley, Nathan Schaff, Passion Tentacle, Pink Ostrich, Praxi Battle, Rivokas Magma, Saxon, Scott from NerdSync, Shogun, Silly Rookie, Skyhoppers, Sleepy Slug, Suitcase, Surashu, Sweet Pink, Sivaru Gata, That Queer Birdman, Tobias Mattsson, Twin Bee the Tailmaster, Tyler Crowley, VG, Vexelbon, and Yami Shaggy, Also introducing Joseph M, James Rule, Sylphrine, Cameron Regal, Cam Lewis, Fathora, Jump on Everything, Alex Roth, Tuckle with an underscore, Daniel Green, Sophilautia, Nolan Weisgerber, Perska. I did it, and that's it. I hope you liked the video. Now I'm gonna take off this head and finally breed for the first time in 2 months. Woo! Oh my god! I'm coming! Ugh!